Chapter 25. Sacrifice and Triumph.
Pain was a living thing, not the sharp bite of injury or the dull ache of healing wounds, but something fundamental that rewrote the neural pathways governing sensation itself. Theron's lightning had carved through my shoulder with divine precision. Electrical fury didn't just burn flesh, but unmade it at the molecular level. The apple of Eden's power held, barely. A golden shield kept my consciousness tethered to a body that should have been scattered across volcanic stone in component atoms. I couldn't breathe. Each attempt sent white-hot agony through torn muscles and cauterized nerves. My lungs struggled against ribs that felt fractured by the shockwave alone. The obsidian plateau was warm beneath me, radiating geological heat through armor that had been partially fused to skin by electrical discharge. Above, Kaelan's roar shattered what remained of Theron's storm clouds. The sound went beyond anything I'd witnessed during the battle. Not rage. Rage was too simple, too human a word for what poured from his throat. This was primal fury distilled across 5 centuries of violence. Berserker wrath given voice through vocal cords beyond mortal limitation. The air itself seemed to fracture around the harmonics. Reality flinched away from divine fury rendered audible. Through vision fragmenting into crystal shards, I watched him fall upon Theron like an avalanche given malevolent purpose. The Stormbringer tried to defend himself. Lightning coalesced around his frame with desperate speed. Divine electricity formed barriers that had withstood assaults from forces beyond human comprehension. But Kaelan moved through them like they were morning mist. His illusion sight let him perceive the gaps between energy patterns. His berserker rage gave him strength to simply not care when residual discharge carved new scars across already marked flesh. His massive hands seized Theron's armored form with force that crumpled divine metal like paper. The sound was wrong. Not the sharp crack of breaking, but the prolonged shriek of fundamental structures failing under impossible pressure. Silver eyes widened with understanding that came too late. Theron's cruel features twisted into something approaching fear as he recognized what was about to happen.
You dared.
Kaelan's voice carried harmonics that made the plateau's volcanic stone vibrate in sympathetic resonance.
You dared touch what was mine!
The possessive fury in those words should have terrified me, should have triggered every warning about divine nature learned through 20 years of post-conquest survival. But consciousness was fading beneath shock and blood loss. My perception narrowed to a tunnel that held only the terrible beauty of gods destroying each other over the broken body of a mortal who'd stolen fruit to save dying children. Kaelan's hands found purchase in the gaps his initial assault had created. Divine fingers dug through armor designed to contain tempest energy, through flesh that had been hardened by consumption of countless refined consciousnesses. Theron screamed, a sound that carried frequencies operating on dimensions adjacent to physical reality. His agony echoed across barriers that separated worlds within the cosmic tree. Then Kaelan pulled. The tearing sound echoed across the plateau, like reality itself weeping. Divine blood sprayed in arcs that painted abstract violence across volcanic stone. Patterns too terrible and too beautiful for mortal minds to process safely. Theron's bisected form tumbled toward obsidian ground that drank in storm god essence with the eagerness of soil starved for nutrients. The Stormbringer's silver eyes held mine for a fraction of a second as he fell. Not rage or malice, but something closer to satisfaction. He'd proven his point. Sentiment did cost. Caring made you vulnerable in ways that pure violence never could. Then those eyes glazed with the approach of something that wasn't quite death. Gods were harder to kill than simple physical trauma. But banishment, absolute. His consciousness scattered like morning mist. Divine essence bleeding back to whatever realm birthed his power, where he'd spend centuries recovering the strength necessary to manifest again in physical reality. Across the battlefield, elemental armies collapsed like puppets with severed strings. Lightning sprites dissolved into static discharge that crackled harmlessly against volcanic stone. Thunder beings crumbled to ash that scattered on winds suddenly still without Stormlord will to direct them. The coordinated chaos that had threatened to overwhelm the pack through sheer numbers evaporated like bad dreams exposed to waking light. The Lycanthropes pressed their advantage with ruthless efficiency. Grimjaw's howl of triumph split the air as her flank surged through the crumbling defenses, claws and fangs finishing what their alpha's fury had begun. Ironback's scarred hide bore fresh wounds, but the veteran stood firm. His amber eyes tracked remaining threats with predatory focus. Swiftclaw moved like liquid shadow despite her phantom injuries. Her lean frame coordinated the final assault with tactical brilliance earned through centuries of shared combat. Victory, complete, absolute. But I was dying. The realization came with strange clarity. My consciousness finally processed the information my body had been screaming since Theron's lightning found its mark. The apple's power had prevented instant vaporization, but it couldn't heal damage this catastrophic. Not fast enough. Blood pooled beneath me. Too much blood. The kind of volume that meant vital organs had been compromised beyond simple tissue repair. Then Kaelan was beside me. His massive frame folded to gather my broken body against armor still warm from berserker flames. His scarred hands trembled as they traced patterns across wounds that leaked life with each labored breath. Divine energy poured into me with desperate intensity.
Stay with me.
The command carried undertones I'd never heard before. Not divine authority, but raw plea, desperate in ways beyond cosmic politics.
Vera, stay.
I tried to respond. Tried to tell him it was all right. That the children lived because of stolen fruit. That some prices were worth paying for miracles that saved innocent lives. But words wouldn't form. My lungs couldn't find enough air to shape syllables, and darkness was rising like a tide I couldn't resist. His amber eyes met mine, and I saw something break in their depths. Not rage or fury, but grief. Pure and terrible and utterly human despite 5 centuries of divine existence. His massive frame curled around mine, wings spreading to shelter us from a reality that had suddenly become unbearable.
Don't leave me.
He whispered against my hair, his voice rough with anguish beyond words.
Please, I will not.
The pack gathered around us in a protective circle. Their amber eyes reflected firelight from berserker flames that still flickered across their alpha's frame. Grimjaw's massive form limped close despite her own injuries. Her elongated skull lowering in a gesture of pack grief beyond species barriers. Even wounded, they maintained a defensive perimeter against threats that no longer existed. Loyalty beyond tactical necessity. Then light descended, not the natural illumination of volcanic plateau or alien stars, but radiance that existed in dimensions adjacent to physical space. Pure brilliance that hurt to perceive directly, even through consciousness, fragmenting beneath shock and blood loss. The air itself seemed to recoil as geometry manifested that violated every principle of physics and sanity. 6 wings beat against existence itself. The Seraph materialized like judgment made manifest. Its form too complex for human minds to fully process. Hundreds of eyes reflected wisdom so terrible that direct observation threatened what remained of my coherence. Each feather seemed carved from light solidified into matter through sheer force of cosmic will. Their radiance cast shadows that moved with purpose independent of their source. The weight of its presence pressed against consciousness like the gravity of collapsing suns. Not hostile, at least not overtly, but vast in ways that reduced individual awareness to insignificant data points in calculations spanning multiple dimensions. Every thought, every choice, every desperate decision that had led to this moment lay exposed to scrutiny that missed nothing and forgave even less. Kaelan's berserker rage evaporated like dew beneath morning sun. His massive frame went utterly still against mine. Divine power suppressed by proximity to authority beyond petty conflicts between lesser gods. When he spoke, His voice carried submission earned through centuries of service to powers that viewed him as a weapon to be pointed where directed.
She's dying.
The words emerged flat, stripped of the fury that had just torn a Stormbringer in half.
I cannot save her. The damage goes beyond healing, beyond even divine medicine applied with perfect precision.
Behold the culmination.
The Seraph's voice bypassed language entirely, whispers that rewrote local physics with each syllable, meaning impressed directly onto consciousness through channels beyond human comprehension. Its manifold eyes tracked us with attention that felt like being cataloged, evaluated, reduced to variables and equations balanced through systematic processing of awareness itself.
All events orchestrated toward this singular moment of choice.
The revelation struck like a physical blow despite my body's inability to register additional trauma. Understanding crystallized with terrible clarity. The wasting plague that had started everything, my desperate theft of golden fruit, Theron's rebellion, even this final battle. Not random chance or consequence of individual decisions, but predetermined moves in a game played by powers that viewed gods as playing pieces and mortals as currency in exchanges sustaining cosmic hierarchy. You manipulated everything. The accusation emerged as a gasp through lips that tasted of copper and electrical ozone. The children. Dying. All of it. Your design.
Guided.
The Seraph's correction carried infinite patience. The tone of an adult explaining simple concepts to a child who couldn't grasp the complexity of systems governing their existence.
The plague was necessity. Motivation to drive desperate action beyond normal constraints. The theft, inevitable consequence of specific pressures applied with surgical precision. The rebellion required catalyst to force confrontation between powers that preferred avoiding direct conflict. Each step led inexorably toward this offer, this choice, this moment when love wars with principle across the broken body of a mortal who dare defy divine order.
Kaelan's frame went rigid against mine. His scarred features twisted with understanding that carried 5 centuries of experience with cosmic manipulation.
You used her, used dying children, used my research, used everything.
We shape circumstances toward desired outcomes. That is the nature of governance when dealing with consciousnesses that mistake individual initiative for genuine autonomy.
The casual dismissal in those whispered syllables made something deep in my chest ache beyond physical pain. We were all playing pieces. Every choice we'd made, every desperate decision, every moment when we'd thought ourselves acting with genuine agency. All of it anticipated, accounted for, guided toward conclusions that served purposes we couldn't begin to fathom. In the Seraph's manifold hands, pure ambrosia gleamed with beauty beyond mortal comprehension. Not the amber vials I'd glimpsed during exchanges, but something more refined, more concentrated. Liquid starlight contained within crystalline vessels that seemed carved from solidified reality itself. Enough to heal wounds that defied divine medicine, to grant immortality across cosmic ages, to transform mortal flesh into something that could survive the weight of eternity.
The terms are simple. Save her life. Grant her divine status through systematic application of refined consciousness. Complete the Apple project under our watchful guidance, ensuring alternatives to our distribution systems remain controlled by appropriate authorities. Accept these conditions, and all that you desire becomes reality. She lives. Your research continues. The pack endures. Even your precious freedom might be negotiated within parameters acceptable to cosmic hierarchy.
The offer hung in air that tasted of ozone and impossible choices. Around us, the pack had gone utterly still. Their amber eyes reflected the terrible weight of a decision that would determine all their fates. Grimjaw's massive form trembled with barely contained emotion. Not rage or territorial possession, but something approaching fear for outcomes beyond pack control. Kaelan's arms tightened around me. Divine strength cradling my broken body with gentleness that belied hands capable of tearing stormlords in half. His amber eyes met mine, searching for answers to questions that had no acceptable solutions. I saw the war raging behind his gaze. 5 centuries of service to cosmic hierarchy that reduced gods to controlled assets. 400 years of research aimed at independence from systems built on systematic harvesting of consciousness itself. Centuries of loss and abandonment teaching him that caring invited the kind of betrayal that defined his existence. Against all that accumulated history, a mortal woman who'd stolen from his grove, who'd challenged his authority, who'd somehow carved space in a heart he'd thought long dead to emotional attachment. A botanist who understood plants in ways beyond mere academic knowledge. A thief who'd prioritized dying children over cosmic consequences she couldn't have predicted. Someone worth protecting, worth choosing, even when that choice meant surrendering everything he'd fought to achieve across lifetimes spanning the rise and fall of civilizations.
I cannot lose you.
His voice rough with anguish beyond divine nature.
The research, the freedom, the rebellion against cosmic authority. None of it matters if you're not here to see what we might have achieved together.
The admission should have felt like triumph, validation that I mattered beyond breeding stock or botanical expertise, but it tasted of ashes and accumulated grief, because I understood what acceptance would cost. The children, I managed through lips that barely functioned, died, make you slave, understanding flickered in his amber eyes. He knew what I was trying to say. That the same impulse that had driven me to steal from divine groves to save dying children couldn't accept salvation purchased through eternal servitude. That some prices were too high even when paid by someone else on your behalf.
The mortal speaks wisdom beyond her years.
The Seraph's manifold eyes turned toward me with attention that made my fragmenting consciousness recoil. Those hundreds of pupils reflected calculations spanning timescales beyond mortal comprehension, weighing variables in equations that treated individual agency as acceptable losses balanced against cosmic stability.
Yet wisdom paired with inevitable death serves no constructive purpose. Accept eternal life, contribute botanical expertise to controlled research programs, become what you were always meant to be. A bridge between mortal ingenuity and divine capability, safely contained within hierarchies designed to prevent dangerous independence from challenging established order.
The words pressed against my consciousness like the weight of stars. Cosmic authority offering bargains that would reshape existence itself. Part of me, the part that had watched children waste away, that had buried friends beneath soil that should have yielded life, wanted to accept, wanted the miracle of continued breathing, the chance to see silver blossoms bloom in village squares, the possibility of collaborative research that might change everything. But another part, the part that had stolen from gods, that had defied authority figures my entire life, that had learned through bitter experience that some systems couldn't be reformed from within, recognized the trap beneath the offer. Eternal life purchased through eternal servitude. Freedom from death in exchange for surrender of every choice that made consciousness worth preserving. No, the word emerged as a whisper that cost more effort than screaming. Not your terms, not chains.
Vera.
The apples. I gasped. Each word a separate act of defiance against a body demanding surrender to darkness. Your research. Freedom for everyone, not just us.
The mortal chooses death over compromise. How unexpected.
The Seraph's tone carried something that might have been respect in a being capable of such emotion. Its wings beat once against existence itself, their movement sending ripples through dimensions adjacent to physical reality.
Very well. We shall honor genuine autonomy when displayed with such conviction. The choice is made, the consequences accepted. Let it be recorded that mortal consciousness, when properly motivated, can resist even the most generous offerings from cosmic authority.
The crystalline vessels containing pure ambrosia dissolved like morning mist, their contents bleeding back into whatever realm sustained the Seraph's terrible existence. The manifold eyes tracked Kaelan with attention of calculations beyond my ability to comprehend. weighing his response against variables and equations spanning multiple worlds.
Worldbreaker, you have won your battle but lost your prize. The mandate is hereby rescinded. We acknowledge that this particular pairing serves no constructive purpose when the mortal component rejects participation despite facing inevitable cessation. Your research may continue according to existing parameters, though we shall monitor progress with increased scrutiny given recent complications emerging from unauthorized collaboration.
The Seraph began dissolving like ash scattered on winds that obeyed different physical laws. But its final whisper carried across the plateau with weight that promised future encounters would involve even higher stakes.
Do not mistake our departure for absence of interest. The host of heaven remembers defiance. When next we meet, circumstances may prove less negotiable.
Then it was gone, and we were alone on volcanic stone, painted with divine blood and the aftermath of battles that had rewritten local reality. Kaelan's amber eyes held mine, and I saw grief there too terrible for divine beings to properly process. 5 centuries of existence, and he'd never learned how to face loss without rage or berserker fury to channel the pain into something manageable.
You chose death.
His voice carried wonder mixed with anguish.
Over immortality, over everything, you chose this.
Chose freedom. The correction emerged through consciousness rapidly fragmenting. Yours, theirs, everyone's. His massive hand cradled my face with gentleness beyond his nature. Scarred thumb tracing patterns across features already going cold.
You impossible, magnificent, stubborn woman. Even dying, you're still trying to save everyone but yourself.
Around us, the pack had pressed closer, their amber eyes reflecting firelight from volcanic stone and something approaching grief beyond species comprehension. Grimjaw's elongated skull lowered until her massive snout nearly touched my shoulder. Her breath warm against skin growing cold despite the plateau's geological heat. The apple of Eden's power was failing. I could feel its golden protection unraveling like thread pulled from a tapestry, each moment bringing me closer to the cessation the Seraph had named with such clinical precision. Soon there would be nothing left. No consciousness to preserve, no awareness to process the miracles that stolen fruit had achieved. But the children lived. Silver blossoms would bloom in village squares, and somewhere in mountain sanctuaries, research continued that might someday free divine beings from cosmic hierarchies built on systematic harvesting of awareness itself. Some prices were worth paying? Promise me. The words cost more effort than remaining breaths should have allowed. The research continues.
I promise.
His voice broke on the words, divine throat producing sounds beyond normal speech.
The apples will bloom. Freedom will come. Everything you fought for.
Not revenge, I managed, feeling darkness rising like a final tide. The Seraph? They're just doing what? They think, right?
You're defending the beings who manipulated you toward death?
Disbelief warred with anguish in his tone. Everyone deserves chance. Choose. My vision was fragmenting into pieces that wouldn't assemble properly. Even cosmic bureaucrats. The absurdity of it. Dying on volcanic stone while advocating mercy for powers that had orchestrated every step toward this moment. Should have been laughable. But Kaelan's scarred features held something approaching understanding. After 5 centuries of violence, he recognized the kind of stubborn idealism that refused to yield, even when yielding would have been infinitely more practical.
I love you.
The admission emerged rough, torn from a throat that hadn't spoken those words in living memory.
I don't know when it happened, or how someone like me could feel something beyond pack loyalty and berserker rage. But you carved space in places I thought long dead to emotional attachment. And I love you with whatever passes for a soul and beings built from divine manipulation and accumulated violence.
The words should have filled me with joy. Instead, they tasted of grief and missed opportunities. Of collaborative research that would never reach completion. Of botanical miracles that would bloom in gardens I'd never witness. Love. You, too. The confession cost the last reserves of consciousness stubbornly clinging to awareness. Worth it all. Worth His arms crushed me against armor still warm from berserker flames, divine strength somehow not breaking what remained of fragile biology. Around us, the pack pressed closer, Grimjaw's massive form trembling despite her wounds, Ironback's scarred hide reflecting firelight, Swiftclaw's amber eyes wide with something approaching anguish. They had witnessed their alpha's transformation from brutal conqueror to something capable of this raw, terrible grief. The obsidian plateau was warm beneath me. Above, stars I'd never learned the names of painted the sky in patterns that obeyed different astronomical principles. Blood pooled beneath my broken body. Too much blood. The kind of volume that meant seconds rather than minutes remained. I had stolen from gods to save dying children. I had defied cosmic authority to preserve choices that made consciousness worth protecting. I had loved someone across barriers designed to prevent such complications, and been loved in return by a being who'd forgotten that violence wasn't the only response to pain. Some prices were worth paying. The darkness rose like a tide I couldn't resist. Not frightening anymore, but almost welcoming. Rest after struggles that had demanded more than mortal flesh could sustain. My consciousness fragmented further with each labored breath. Awareness narrowing to a tunnel that held only Kaelan's scarred features and amber eyes blazing with emotion, too vast for divine nature to properly contain. Through the dimming edges of perception, I felt him shift. His massive frame straightened. Divine power gathering around him like storm clouds pregnant with lightning. The grief in his expression transformed into something else. Determination forged in the crucible of impossible choice. His amber eyes lifted toward where the Seraph had dissolved, toward the spaces between dimensions where cosmic authority watched with patient inevitability. When he spoke, his voice carried across the plateau with weight that made volcanic stone vibrate in sympathetic resonance.
Wait.
The single word hung in air that suddenly felt thick with gathering significance. The pack went utterly still, their amber eyes tracking their alpha with a tension of pack bonds, sensing momentous decision forming in the spaces where love warred with principle. Kaelan's scarred hand cradled my face with gentleness beyond his nature, massive thumb tracing patterns across features already going cold. His amber gaze held mine, and I saw 5 centuries of accumulated experience crystallizing into a choice that would reshape everything.
I cannot...
His voice fractured on the words. Divine control failing beneath the weight of emotion he'd spent lifetimes trying to suppress.
I will not...
The crystalline vessels containing pure ambrosia materialized once more in the spaces between dimensions, their contents gleaming with promise of miracles that could rewrite mortality itself. The Seraph's presence pressed against reality's edge, manifold eyes reflecting patience measured in geological ages.
The offer stands. Until consciousness departs entirely, the choice remains. Salvation or principle, love or freedom, tomorrow or nothing.
Kaelan's frame trembled against mine, every muscle tensing as if preparing for battle more terrible than any he'd fought across 5 centuries of conquest. His breath came ragged, divine lungs struggling against the crushing weight of a decision that carried implications spanning cosmic ages. I tried to speak, tried to tell him that my choice was made, that he should honor what I'd fought for even if it cost him everything, but the words wouldn't form. My consciousness was fragmenting too rapidly, darkness closing in like velvet curtains drawing across the final scene of a play that had demanded more than any single performance could sustain. The last thing I perceived was his amber eyes, blazing with terrible determination, with 5 centuries of survival instinct warring against something newer and infinitely more fragile. With the weight of impossible choice pressing down on scarred features that had learned every language of violence, but were still learning the vocabulary of love. His lips moved, forming words I could no longer hear, and then there was only darkness, and the sensation of falling, and the terrible uncertainty of not knowing whether the darkness was final, or merely the space between one existence and whatever might follow. The choice hung suspended in the air above the obsidian plateau, unmade, undecided, waiting.